Good morning, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane HD video blog for Friday, August 3rd, 2012. Welcome to the weekend. A lot to watch as we get through the weekend. Newly designated Invest 90L sitting out here off of Africa. Of course, Ernesto, which will be possibly an increasingly bigger story through the weekend. And then we have this new area off the coast of Florida and the Bahamas. That at the very least will bring squally, rather unsettled weather to portions of the coastal waters of Florida, the Bahamas, and possibly southern Georgia. So a lot to keep track of, keep track over the weekend ahead. Just trying to figure out exactly what my next slide is going to be. So looking at the visible satellite picture, here's Ernesto, not the most well-organized tropical storm we've ever seen, for sure. This little surface trough in here will definitely bear watching, and anytime you have this kind of a feature over very warm waters in August, you have to watch it. And then just coming into the screen here is Invest Area 90L, which will probably come west almost to the area where Ernesto is over the next week or so due to very strong high pressure sitting out here over the Atlantic, and I'll show you that on the last of the graphical slides here coming up. So Ernesto, again, as I pointed out yesterday, blobs of convection do not really cut it for tropical cyclones. You need banding convection where it wraps around a common center, these different blobs of bursting convection where it goes up and then it collapses, not healthy for development. Nevertheless, the island of Barbados right there, and then St. Lucia here, definitely getting some squally weather. St. Lucia, where the center passed very close to receiving a wind gust to 63 miles per hour. Ernesto moving through at a really rapid pace of 24 miles per hour, and that also not healthy because it's not able to gather its strength. I mean, imagine that you're trying to run down the street while trying to balance 10 feet of plates, you know, like you see in a circus or something where they try to spin the plates around and stack them up. You can't do it. You need to be still if you're going to balance that many plates. And the same type of thing in the tropics. If these cyclones are moving too fast, they get tilted with height and they're not able to grow vertically. Now there is a little bit of banding going on, and you can see this on the visible satellite picture. Got that S shape to the system overall. Pretty small envelope here. Ernesto may kind of shrink as it moves westward, and that might help it a little bit, believe it or not, if it can sort of pull itself together, shrink a little bit, and consolidate its energy. We'll wait and see what happens. An interesting forecast for sure. As you probably know, it tracks on through and then heads towards the Northwest Caribbean here, where, as indicated by all these reds and then this white, very high ocean heat content, meaning that the 80-degree temperature in the water goes down very deep. What's called the 80-degree isotherm goes down very deep into the water, and it's not just at the surface that the water is warm, it's also very deep. So if Ernesto survives and does not completely fall apart as it crosses here and then heads more west, if it can get up into this region, it has a chance to develop into a significant tropical storm, or possibly even a hurricane, which is what the current forecast indicates. Now the GFDL model, one of many computer models out there, it puts Ernesto in about 5 days at 24.8 and 86 west, 24.8 north, 86.0 west, going about northwest, 318 degrees at 10.5 knots. And if we look at some of the other computer guidance, mainly looking at the ship's guidance here, the statistical intensity hurricane prediction scheme, 45 knots the initial speed, wind speed, and then 1,002 on the pressure. Let me just talk about wind speed for just a moment. That is not everywhere in the storm. It's not uniform. The hurricane hunters flew in, they sampled the environment. It's just one small airplane, you know, on a big planet. It's a pretty small dot, right? And it's not everywhere all over this the system. and is sampling a very small environment. And the maximum wind that they were able to find, either with their instruments on the plane or from a drop sonde instrument that they put down out of the airplane that drops to the ocean and sends back wind data, was 45 knots. And as the Hurricane Center discussion at 5 a.m. mentioned, that might be a little generous. So don't think that the wind speed is uniform all over the storm. For a great understanding of how the wind field works, look at the Hurricane and Hurricane HD wind field as it's depicted in the graphics, and then read the forecast marine advisory, and it tells you that tropical storm force winds extend out X amount of miles from the center, and if it's a hurricane, how far the hurricane force winds extend out. It's not uniform all over the place, unless you have a very, very well developed eye wall in a very intense hurricane. But even there, wind speeds fluctuate because these storms are dynamic. They're changing every second as that convection goes up and then collapses and new convection forms and tries to wrap around the center. If you get a convective burst, a thunderstorm, if you will, a strong rain band moving over you, your wind speeds can be enhanced. So that's just something to keep in mind. Anyhow, ship's model brings it to hurricane strength in 72 hours. Interesting, because there's definitely some chatter on the hurricane blogosphere, if you will, that Ernesto is doomed as it goes through the gauntlet of the eastern Caribbean Sea. Now, where does the GFDL place it? Well, here's what 24/8 and 86 looks like in the southeast Gulf of Mexico. That's the northwest part of Cuba right there. So not too far off the west coast of Florida by day 5, according to the GFDL. The H-Wharf model, another computer model, not too far off of where the GFDL has it, but a much smaller system. Notice too the sprawling area of high pressure out over the Atlantic, and then this would be 90L entering the islands. One run of the model, don't take it as gospel. Lots of things to keep in mind, but this is what it's showing from the latest run from early this morning. The GFS, I wanted to show you this real quick. This is the early morning run, valid tonight, so this is 24 hours after the run was initialized. And here's Ernesto. Notice that it's kind of round here, the vorticity maximum, the center, and then you have this little impulse off of Florida to watch. And here's 48 hours. See how Ernesto starts to sort of get an odd shape to it, and there's little bits of energy all around it. It's not consolidated, and then that piece of energy over Florida doesn't really do much. But keep in mind, could be some squally weather off the coast of Florida, the Bahamas, and southern Georgia this weekend. Finally, by day 3, Ernesto in the model here, the GFS, opens up into a tropical wave again. See that? It's not completely closed off. You lose the round shape to the vorticity, and to me that's a sign of a weak system. And if this comes to pass, and the GFS is right, and I believe the Euro shows this as well, then Ernesto will track much more to the west towards Central America instead of up here towards the Yucatan Channel. So this will be really interesting, something that's easily verifiable. We will know in 3 days. Is Ernesto going to pull a Felix, where the global models just have a hard time seeing it? Felix in 2007 was a very powerful Category 5 hurricane that came into Central America that the GFS showed as a 1,004 millibar little weak storm, even though it was a very intense hurricane. Sometimes the global models can't see the forest for the trees. Something like that, right? The bigger picture at day 5. This is the entire Atlantic basin. Here is Africa. Here's the east coast of the U.S. Strong high pressure here over the Atlantic, meaning I would assume, it's logical to assume this, that 90L, which is out here today, that in day 5 would be sitting somewhere over here, perhaps. With this area of high pressure sitting out here, in other words, we do not have a big dipping trough out here to yank 90L and send it out to sea. Instead, a very large, deep layer, ridge of high pressure sitting over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, some of it ridging back here to the west near Bermuda, and the Carolinas, the Bermuda High. So this system 90L, it should march westward over the next few days, giving us lots to track as we start and move through August here. So there you have it. You're up to date for today, and a lot going on. Stay tuned to Hurricane HD, as well as hurricanetrack.com and your other favorite web sources for information regarding all of these systems. And if you're affected by one of them, be safe out there, all right? Use common sense. That's what it's all about. You do that, and you should fare okay. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, my website, hurricanetrack.com. I'll have another video blog for you here tomorrow.